Hey, y'all. I'm going to keep my mask on because I have a little bit of a cold, so that's why that's happening. So when Allison told me that the theme for Newman Lumen was dreaming, I got kind of worried because I am a very young 22, and there's a whole lot that I really don't know. I initially felt very unqualified because, I haven't had a dream, nailed it down, made a plan, and executed it. But this talk isn't necessarily about plan, beginning, start, end, result. This talk is about dreaming. And if you ask any of my roommates, these four right here, I walk into our living room and announce the new profession that I've decided I am going to do a couple times a week. I wrote down, I have a little list here of what I've decided I was going to do with my life this year alone. So first it was data scientist, followed by FBI forensic scientist, quickly followed by CIA agent, then EMT, then sheriff. Then I decided I wanted to be a researcher for an institute like Pew, and most recently I've decided that I am going to be a video game developer. Where's the camera? Take that, Mom. So it turns out maybe because I'm so new at this life thing, I am actually an expert dreamer. I am also a senior, and I, like many other seniors, are full of anxiety about what I want to do with my life. That's where I first thought about dreaming. It was my dreams for the future. A whole lot of people have told me that their degree doesn't necessarily affect what they do with their life. They got a degree in one thing and they went a different direction. Or maybe they pursued that and then pivoted and decided they wanted to do something else. That is helpful and that's good to know, but it's a little bit impossible to just accept that and be at peace. And I started thinking a little bit more about people that continue to explore after college. And it reminded me of a principle that we use in computer science. And it's called the explore-exploit principle. So explore means just gather new data. And exploit, though it has a negative connotation in the English language, it's not negative. It just means use the data you have to make a decision. So the best way I can explain it is to just do a quick example. So let's say you move to a new city, a new town, and you're apartment hunting. So if you go and you see an apartment, you're probably not going to buy the first apartment you see because you need to start to have an idea of, well, what do the apartments look like? You need to see the landscape. And so the question is, how much time do you spend just gathering data, just looking at apartments, getting an idea, and then when do you decide, all right, now I'm going to make a decision? So it turns out, and I'm not going to go too deep into the math because we'd be here for a long time, there is actually an answer to this question. And the answer relates to the timeline of how you're searching. And in computer science, we call that the interval. So if you have 10 days to look for an apartment, you should look for the first 37% of those 10 days. And after that 37%, the first apartment you see that is as good or better as the ones you've already seen, you should buy it. That is mathematically going to get you the best apartment. And if you're interested in that, this is a book called Algorithms to Live By, and it's about the computer science of human decisions. Very, very interesting. Now, it's kind of fun that we have that 37% answer, but of course, life isn't always necessarily like that. And sometimes exploring at the very end of your timeline can still yield very important results. And it's time for me to wake up. Okay, so it's nice to know the number, but life is a little more, life comes at you fast. But what this number does tell me is that I am not behind. It really is okay that I'm still in the exploring phase of figuring out what I want to do. And with a rough life expectancy of around 80, that would put 37% at the age of 29. So it would be pretty absurd to stop exploring now, and it would be pretty absurd to know exactly what I want to do with my life now. Now, the biggest difference between computers and life in terms of this problem is when you're given a problem with a computer, you have this timeline is set, and you have to solve the problem within that given timeline. In life, this isn't the case. Now, sometimes there are timelines that you can't control. You need to get that new apartment before you start your new job. You got 10 days. However, in artificial intelligence, you try to make a human brain, and we can't do it. We can't do it. The human brain is something incredibly magical, and we have the ability to start and define our own timelines. So for those of you who are my age in the audience, keep exploring. No matter what your timeline is right now, you are at the start of it, and there's nothing wrong with exploring. Now, the reason the 37% principle isn't as dim as it seems for anyone over the age of 29 is because it applies to only a single timeline, a single interval. So if you eventually realize maybe you don't like your apartment, well, boom, new interval, find a new apartment. Or maybe you decide you don't love your job, boom, new interval, find a new job. We have the ability to define these timelines whenever we want. This, to me, is the mathematical proof that we should never stop dreaming. So now that we've established that, we should never stop dreaming and we should never stop exploring, what should we do with that dream? Well, like I said, I'm an expert dreamer, but not necessarily an expert executor of dreams. So to shed some light on kind of the narrative of how we dream and how those things come to be, I'd like to read a poem called Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? If this poem sounds familiar, it probably is. This is the poem that spurred Lorraine Hansberry to write the play, a very famous play called A Raisin in the Sun. And without going into a full book report, I've already told you about one book. One of the most prominent themes in A Raisin in the Sun is that a lot of the characters have dreams, but they are dreams that are deferred. And pay attention to the language. They're not necessarily rejected or failed, they're deferred. And to me, that is the worst thing that can happen. The dream just sits dormant, almost taunting the characters as they are they're not even unable to follow their dream, they're unable to try to follow their dream. And so you never have an answer of whether or not you really could follow that dream. And I would say that if a dream just sits there and you're not able to at least try to follow it, it spawns resentment to you for not following it, and it will dry up like a raisin in the sun, or far worse. Luckily, to shed some further light on dreams, we have another poem by Langston Hughes, aptly named Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. So I leave you with a couple things. Dream. If you feel like you're behind, you aren't. There is a whole lot of time to explore and dream. Anyone around college age, you have so much time to keep figuring stuff out. And with that said, you are in control of your life and your narrative and your interval of exploration. Finally, when you dream, and when you find the dream that really hits you, you have no choice but to go for it. And if it seems scary to follow that dream, take a minute to read some Langston Hughes or peruse Raisin in the Sun, and your course forwards will be obvious. Thanks.